slow and steady always wins the race. But everything performing great with the vehicle so far, all of its checkouts done successfully, and all the navigation and that automated rendezvous control. So we'll start to listen in now as we continue to hear calls between Anatoly Ivanishin, the Soyuz commander, and the flight controllers over in Koryov as the Soyuz spacecraft begins its approach.
Дальность 3, скорость 8,1.
The range is 3 and the rate is 8.1 meters per second. Copy.
Ожидаем третий импульс сближения.
We are standing by for the third approach burn. We are standing by as well.
Дальность 2,7, скорость 8.
The range is 2.7 and the rate is 8. Copy.
Дальность 2,5, скорость 8.
The range is 2.5 and the rate is 8. We can see the maneuver. The station has moved to the right, practically at 90 degrees. Copy, Irkutsk.
Наблюдаем разворот для выдачи третьего импульса.
Maneuver is confirmed as well. We can see it as well.
Getting a live view of sunrise as the station 271 statute miles over the South Pacific about to cross the terminator, that line between night and day on the Earth's surface. The Soyuz spacecraft coming up on 2 kilometers away and closing, right now at about 7.5 meters per second.
We have a combined GSO in attitude at 16:42:11. SKD activated at 16:42:17. 1.5 meters, 2 meters, 3 parameters of schedule are nominal. 4, we have observed the schedule deactivation. And the oxygen supply. So the burn delta V is 5.06 meters per second. Copy.
Wow. Мы сейчас картинку не получаем.
We are not receiving the image right now. Could you please provide the running commentary?
Дальность 1,6, скорость 4.
The range is 1.6, so the rate is 4. Copy.
You're continuing to get those good call-outs from Anatoly Ivanishin. He's giving the range and the range rate. So they're about 1.6 kilometers away from station, closing in at about 4 meters per second right now. That range rate is going to continue to drop. We'll eventually hit 0 after we do the fly around and hit station keeping. And then the Soyuz will begin its final approach, coming in at a rate of about 1/10 of a meter per second. The Soyuz is right now executing a couple of final burns known as impulse burns. These are quick firings of the engines just to continue fine-tuning that path.
Принято.
Copy.
To just get a confirmation from the visiting vehicle officer that the Impulse 4 burn was done successfully. The Impulse 5 burn should be coming up in about a minute. It will be a 5 and a 6. And then that will place the Soyuz just about 400 meters away from the station. Then it's going to execute a fly around, going from underneath the station up to the top, looking back down, as it's going to be eventually docking to that space-facing side of the station itself.
Дальность 1,2, скорость 3,8.
The range is 1.2, the rate is 3.8.
And getting our first look now, this view from the Soyuz looking up at the station, closing in at about as it starts to catch a little bit more sunlight, that'll firmly come into view. The numbers to really pay attention to, down in the bottom left corner, that top one you can see 1.099 kilometers. That's the range away from the station. Just beneath that, the meters per second, that's the closure rate. So right now we're closing at about 3.5 meters per second.
Дальность километр, скорость 3.4.
The range is 1 kilometer and the rate 3.4. DPO activation is confirmed and the braking is in progress. Copy.
Дальность 900, скорость 2,5.
So the range is 900 meters and the rate is 2.5 meters per second. Copy.
Дальность 800, скорость 840, скорость 2,3.
The range is 840, and the rate is 2.3. Copy.
Дальность 800, скорость 2,2.
The range is 800, the rate is 2.2. The braking is complete. Vanya, could you please use AGC mode? Stand by.
Дальность 750, скорость 2,2.
The range is 750 and the rate is 2.2.
So inside 750 meters, and another good confirmation Impulse 5 burn has been done successfully.
4806, I am sending AGC command. Do you want me to do it again? Yes, let's do it again. And again? Well, maybe one more. Now let's leave it like that. So the range is 660 and the rate is 2.2. Copy.
And there we have a great view of the Soyuz MS-16 continuing its approach to the station. This is a camera looking from the bottom down back towards planet Earth. Soyuz is going to continue to approach at this angle and eventually execute a fly-around maneuver once it gets about 400 meters away from the station.
Copy. Yes, let's leave it like that, Ivan. The range is 600, the rate is 1.4.
Принято.
Copy.
Вход в ближний участок.
We're standing by for
Страница 63.
the close distance approach. And we are standing by for proximity ops.
And the visiting vehicle officer here in Houston confirming Impulse 6 is done. That's the 6th and final impulse burn, just fine-tuning and beginning to break the Soyuz approach to the station. Next milestone is going to be that fly around once it gets to about 400 meters away.
So the range is 520, the rate is 1.4.
It's just 120 meters to go, and then they'll start executing that fly around. That'll essentially be about a half loop from the bottom of the station all the way up to the top side, where Soyuz will eventually orient itself with the docking probe pointing back down towards Earth as it moves in on the space-facing side docking port known as POISC, or the Mini Research Module 2.
The range is 460, the rate is 1.3, copy. The range is 420 and the rate is 1.2. Copy.
And again, we're coming up on that 400-meter point, and then right after that, we should hear the beginning of fly around.
The range is 400 and the rate is 1.1. Fly around is confirmed. Copy. Fly around.
And confirmation the fly around has begun. So we're going to see the Soyuz spacecraft begin to swing its way from the bottom over top of the International Space Station.
The range is 370. The rate is 1.1. Copy. The range is 350 and the rate is 0.8. The range is 330 and the rate is 0.9. The range is 310. The rate is 0.75. Copy. The range is 300. The rate is 0.75. The range is 280 meters and the rate is 0.63. Copy.
You're just now tuning in. You are looking at the Soyuz MS-16 spacecraft. 3 crew members on board, NASA's Chris Cassidy and Roscosmos cosmonauts Anatoly Ivanishin and Ivan Vagner. They're in what's known as the fly around right now. They closed into 400 meters away from the station. They're still getting a little bit closer, but primarily this maneuver is done to bring the Soyuz from the bottom of the station up to the top. It's all in the name. It's the fly around. That'll eventually line it up with its docking port known as the POISC module. And once it finishes this fly around, we'll enter into a period of what's known as station keeping. That gives a chance for the automated system on board the Soyuz to finish fine-tuning that alignment before they begin the final approach.
250 meters is the range and 05 is the rate. Copy. The range is 240 meters and the rate is 0.4. The range is 235 meters and the rate is 0.36. Copy. The range is 230 meters and the rate is 0.25.
метров 0,2.
220 meters is the range, and the rate is 0.2. Copy.
This camera from the very forward end of the Soyuz keeping the station right in the middle of its crosshairs. And this actually giving us a really good view of its eventual docking port. If you look just above the middle of the crosshairs on that center line, it's perfectly splitting the Russian segment of the station right now. To the left is the Piers docking compartment with the 74 Progress vehicle currently docked. And just to the right is that empty Poist docking port. That's pointing back into space. It's on the zenith side of the Zvezda service module, and that is where this Soyuz is bound. So it's going to continue this pirouette around the station until it has that Poist right in its crosshair. We'll be in the station keeping so it can fine-tune its alignment, and then we'll begin the final approach.
метров 0,1.
210 meters is the range, and the rate is 0.1. Copy.
метров 0,1.
The range is 209 meters, and the rate is 0.1.
метров 0,7.
The closing range is 208 meters, and the rate is 0.7.
метров 0,05.
The range is 206 meters, and the rate is 0.05. Copy.
метра 0,04.
The range is 204 meters, and the rate is 0.04.
метра 0,07.
So at this point, the Soyuz has changed its angle of attack to the station by about 60 degrees. This entire maneuver is going to change it about 123 degrees, so not a full 180 from one side to the other, as it did approach the station at a bit of an oblique angle. but by the time it's done with this fly around, it will be right over top of that poise module looking straight back down. Seeing a couple of thruster firings as it continues to fine-tune in this fly-around maneuver. Right now maintaining a distance of about 200 meters as it begins this roughly half circle over top of the station. Right now both vehicles flying over the northern part of South America, right over Colombia, about to cross over the border between Colombia and Venezuela, and then eventually moving out over the Caribbean. Again, this entire operation right now being done automatically. An automated rendezvous system on the Soyuz, the cores communicating with antennas back on the station itself.
Range rate 0.1.
Приняли.
Copy. Range is 200.
Thanks to plenty of sunlight, getting a lot of views there. The thruster firings as the Soyuz continues to fine-tune.
Range is 200 meters. Range rate is 0.08.
Принято.
Copy.
Причал курса.
And approach flag is confirmed
Принято. Причал курса.
for course. 200 meters is the range. Range rate is 0.02.
Заканчиваем выход на ось
We are completing the docking interface access. Copy.
Иркут, АК-15 сейчас у вас горит?
0.1 is the current range rate. Come again.
АК-15 сейчас горит?
And the LED is on. Yes, approach flag just illuminated, and we are currently aligned with the docking interface access. Okay. Okay, please send approach command. Copy all. Command will be executed 17:02:32. This is the time when approach command was sent. Approach flag is set on both vehicles. Copy.
И также действие по 63-й странице.
Please move to page 63. Periscope illumination and headlight. Headlight is on. Copy.
So things moving very rapidly. We completed that fly around, immediately went into station keeping, and then they gave the go to resume the final approach early. So we are looking like we'll probably beat that docking time that was targeted at 9:16 a.m. Central, 10:16 a.m. Eastern, 14:16 GMT. As of right now, the Soyuz spacecraft on final approach.
Range is 170, and range rate is inaudible. Range is 153. Range rate is 0.85. Range is 140. Range rate is 0.85. Range is 130 and range rate is 0.7. Copy.
120, скорость 0,7.
Range is 120, range rate 0.7.
Аня, 110, скорость 05.
110 and range rate 0.5.
Can you see it? Он не верти головой. Yeah, I can see it.
Yes, I can see it. This is Chris.
Дальность 100, скорость 0,30.
Range is 100, range rate 0.55. Copy.
So the Soyuz now just about 100 meters away from docking. That range rate continuing to tick down. Right now they're closing at about a half a meter per second. That's going to go all the way down to about 0.1 meters per second when they get real close to that final approach. We'll see the contact and capture the docking probe on the very front end of the Soyuz spacecraft. We'll make contact with the docking port of the Poist module. And once that's been grabbed, it'll retract the docking probe. That'll pull the Soyuz in closer. And then a series of hooks will be able to engage to give a hard mate, or really a hard latch, to the Soyuz spacecraft, firmly attaching it to the International Space Station.
Range is 70, range rate 0.34. And we can clearly see the target and crosshairs are aligned. Copy. Range is 60 and range rate is 0.27. Range is 50 and range rate is 0.2. Copy. And stand by for SSVP docking and interim transfer system command activation. Standing by. I confirm SSVP docking and internal transfer command activation. Probe is extended, latch is extended, hooks open, SSVP system is ready. Copy all. Range is 40, range rate 15.
A little under 50 meters to go. The MS-16 spacecraft, Chris Cassidy, Anatoly Ivanishin, and Ivan Vagner closing in on that Poist docking module. Just minutes away now from docking.
Range is 35, range rate 15. Visually, approximately 25 meters. Range rate 0.1.
And in this view, the top of the Soyuz is really on the bottom. You can see that docking probe. It's the pointy part right at the tip. And that's what's going to drive into the docking port on the Poisk module. And that'll get retracted, and that'll be able to pull the Soyuz spacecraft in. And a series of hooks around that ring just outside the docking probe will be able to engage and get a hard lock, firmly attaching the Soyuz to the International Space Station. That'll also create a airtight seal between the Soyuz and the International Space Station. And after that, it will create an area known as the vestibule. That's the area of both the Soyuz hatch and the station hatch, typically exposed to the vacuum of space. They'll be able to pressurize that and then kick off a series of leak checks. It does take a little while for that to not only get pressurized, but to make sure that the hatch or the pressure is equalized between the Soyuz, the vestibule, and the station itself. So it takes about 2 hours. Just you don't want to open up those hatches until you know for sure you don't have any leaks, and it can be actually pretty difficult to get them open if you have any pressure differentials. So they wait for everything to settle out before they open the hatches. Typically takes about 2 hours following docking. Now though, inside 30 meters, continuing to close in on Poisk.
Визуально 15.
15 meters visually, rate 0.1.
Визуально 10 метров.
10 meters,
Скорость 0,1.
rate is 0.1.
Визуально 8 метров.
8 meters approximately, range rate is 0.1.
Визуально 6 метров.
6 meters,
Визуально 3 метра.
range visual estimate is 3 meters.
Принято.
Copy.
Ожидаем касания.
Contact. Standing by for contact.
Есть касание, есть подвод, есть.
Contact confirmed. Hooks engaged at 17:13:21.
Принято.
Copy.
And docking confirmed, 9:13 a.m. Central Time, 10:13 a.m. Eastern Time, 14:13 GMT, as the station was flying just about 260 statute miles over the northern Atlantic. Soyuz MS-16 spacecraft docked to the International Space Station. Right now, the docking probe is going to begin to retract. It's going to pull it in, and the hooks are going to start to drive on both the station and on the docking port, the Poisk module.
Please select SSVP docking and internal transfer system display on input 2 control panel.
But with that, Chris Cassidy, Anatoly Ivanishin, and Ivan Vagner's voyage to the International Space Station is complete. They've arrived.
This is the hooks engaged time.
17, 13, 20.
17:13:21. 17:13:21.
Так. Штанга выдвинута.
Well, probe extension. Inaudible.
Людей погасла?
Illumination. LED is not illuminated on the info control panel. Okay. Yes, it's not illuminated.
Параметр КДУ проверяем.
KDU parameters. Let's check that.
Первый шар-баллон 118.
118 and 228. These are the readings for spherical tanks 1 and 2, which are nominal. 476. This is the current propellant reading. Copy all. We have noted down all your reports. Please switch to page 67. Copy all. Page 67. Send an R7 command to deactivate the headlight. And I will close RPV 1 airflow regulator 1. It is now closed.
МК готов.
Command is ready.
Фара, да, отключаем фара.
Yes, let's deactivate the headlight. And please turn on the R.
And so with the Soyuz spacecraft now docked to the International Space Station, at the moment of that docking, the station goes into what's known as free drift, so not under any active attitude control, and that way you're not going to accidentally impart loads into the Soyuz or the docking port if the station starts to maneuver. The Soyuz hooks will close first. That takes a couple of minutes following docking, and then following that, the hooks on the mini research module 2 or the POISC module will then close, and then the space station will once again resume attitude control, that being done right now on the Russian segment using the thrusters on the service module.
The MV pressure gauge.
Так много, сколько он не мерит. Сколько давление?
So what's the pressure reading? Okay, let's.
But again, just in case you missed it, the docking did occur at 9:13 a.m. Central Time, 10:13 a.m. Eastern, 14:13 GMT, with the station and the Soyuz flying 260 statute miles over the northern Atlantic.
When you're ready, we'll be ready to copy all the measurements in table 9-1. Moscow, we copied your last. Moscow, this is Irkut 2, 1740. Sub pressure is 847, BO pressure 826, and assembly compartment pressure is 832. And we cannot measure such pressure using MV pressure gauge. That's too high for that. Okay, copy. And the LED for electrical connectors is illuminated. Hooks open is not illuminated. Standing by for hooks closed LED. Irkut, we have a recommendation for you. Please send G4 command at 1720. Come again. What is the time? 1720. Please send G4 command at that time. Okay, copy. We're going to send G4 command at 1720. And hooks are closed now. Copy. And what did you say about MV pressure gauge? Its measurement range does not allow us to use it to measure SR descent module pressure.
And we heard the call, and we just got confirmation here in Houston that the hooks on the Soyuz side have been closed. Now standing by for the hooks on the Poisk side, so on the station side to close. And then we'll have what's known as hard dock, or really just a firm mate of the Soyuz spacecraft to the station.
And
looking like those hooks are now driving.
Well, you're going to use any control panel. Okay.
So once those hooks are done driving, they'll be able to re-enable the attitude control on the space station. It's able to stay in free drift for quite a while before it would begin to drift out of its attitude. Then after that, we'll enter into what's known as the post-docking procedures. The crew will kick off a series of leak checks on the Soyuz modules and then between the hatches of the Soyuz and the station itself. This will also be the opportunity for Cassidy, Ivanishin, and Vagner to get out of their Sokol engine entry suits that they've been wearing since several hours prior to launch. And it typically takes about 2 hours following the docking for the hatches to be open. Right now we were tracking the hatch open to take place at about 11:15 a.m. Central, 12:15 p.m. Eastern, 16:15 GMT.
This is Irkut 1, and the latches are retracted at 17:21. Copy. Moscow at 17:21:50. Probe is retracted and SSVP mode has been executed. Copy all. We will deactivate SSVP mode. Copy. I'm sending the 8 command to deactivate SSVP dock and an internal transfer system at 17:22.
And we just got confirmation that the hooks have now closed on the MRM-2, the Poisk module. So we now have a hard dock of the Soyuz spacecraft to the International Space Station. For Cassidy, Ivanishin, and Vagner, this is going to kick off a couple of hours of leak checks, getting out of those suits and getting ready to open up the hatch and join the Expedition 62 crew of Mir Morgan and Skripochka on board the International Space Station. So while they go through those leak checks, we are going to take a quick break, but we will be back in time for that hatch opening. So we're going to pick our coverage back up in just about 2 hours from now. We'll be back on the air at 11 a.m. Central, 12 p.m. Eastern, 1600 GMT. The hatch should be open. We have 11:30 on here, but we did dock a little bit early, and we are tracking that hatch open to come around 11:15 or so. But we will obviously keep you updated as we step through those procedures. And then after all of our stuff is done today, we'll be doing a video file here on NASA TV, just showing you all the best views, which there were many for the docking, and we'll be sure to have many during the hatch opening, and that coming up at 2 p.m. Central Time, 3 p.m. Eastern. So successful docking, one more box checked. Our next one will be getting the hatches open, seeing the faces of these 3 crew members as they make their way onto the station, and they're home for the next 6 months in low Earth orbit. So thanks for joining for the docking station. That's our second one of 3 for the day. And we'll be back with hatch opening in just a little while. So stick around, tune back in soon. For now, we'll go ahead and sign off. This is Mission Control Houston.
It was plagued by bad omens and bad luck from the very beginning.
13, we've got one more item for you when you get a chance. We'd like it to stir up your cryo tanks.
It never really converged to the point where you felt you really had total control of what was going on.
Okay, Houston, we've had a problem here.
Status check to proceed with terminal count.
There is a moment at the start of every mission when everything comes together. A moment when years of preparation and planning are put to the test.
Clear to proceed.
There are no second chances.
You have permission to launch.
Success or failure is just a heartbeat away.
Rock report range status. Range green.
A spacecraft and its rocket on the pad, fully fueled and ready to launch.
Status check. Go Delta.
In that moment, a controlled explosion is released with such intense power, it can propel a spacecraft off the Earth and into space for the benefit of all. We call this moment T0. This is its story.
To shed light on the mysteries of our closest star, the Sun.
The Sun, the heart of our solar system. It's as familiar as anything we know. Although the Sun has been studied for millennia, it still holds unsolved mysteries about its effects on our daily lives. To better understand the Sun, NASA is preparing to launch a spacecraft called the Parker Solar Probe. It will lift off from Cape Canaveral Air Force Station near the agency's Kennedy Space Center, located in Florida. It's a mission of unprecedented opportunities that could revolutionize our understanding of our star and the Sun's atmosphere, the corona, a long-time destination goal for scientists such as Dr. Nikki Fox.
Going into the Sun's corona for the first time, going up close and personal with our star, to be able to answer some of the mysteries that live in this coronal region. Why is the Sun's corona hotter than the surface of the Sun? Why is there a solar wind? Why does this atmosphere, this corona, become so energized that it can move away from the Sun at supersonic speeds and bathe all of the planets?
And now that Parker has finally arrived on the Space Coast, we're one step closer to solving those mysteries. Delivered on an Air Force C-17, it's not every day this crew hauls a payload destined for the history books.
Overall, the mission itself is relatively simple. I'd say the biggest challenge is probably the load portion.
A little extra to it too, because normally we're just hauling generic things, but not a $1.5 billion solar probe.
And there's only one world-class program that specializes in missions of this caliber, NASA's Launch Services Program, a team that matches the industry's top-performing rockets with the cutting-edge spacecraft NASA is committed to launching.
LSP is NASA's bridge to space. Basically what we do is we link a spacecraft customer such as the Parker Solar Probe up with a launch vehicle provider such as United Launch Alliance. And we provide them with a custom-built ride to space on a carefully selected launch vehicle.
Engineers and scientists with Astrotech and the Applied Physics Lab teams will spend its last few months checking and testing every element and completing final assembly to be sure it is ready to leave Earth for its epic trip to the Sun. Parker must be perfect before T0 arrives.
Before we start integration with the launch vehicle, we have to do final integration of the spacecraft. That includes attaching the magnetometer boom and magnetometers. We'll then also integrate the solar arrays And then finally, right before integration with the launch vehicle, we'll add the thermal protection system or thermal shield.
The Parker Solar Probe will be the first mission to kiss the sun, flying through the searing heat of the sun's corona, traveling closer to the surface than any other spacecraft before. And to do that, it will need to go faster than any other spacecraft in history. That's why, for the first time ever, NASA's Launch Services Program selected the United Launch Alliance Delta IV Heavy rocket.
Parker Solar Probe will be the fastest human-made object ever. We are traveling at an unbelievable 430,000 miles per hour.
NASA selected Delta IV Heavy for the Parker Solar Probe mission because of the combined energy of the booster, Delta cryogenic second stage, and the third stage, which means that we have enough energy to go to the sun.
I mean, if you look at the vehicle, it's huge. It's approximately 50 feet wide, 170 feet long, and about 190,000 pounds.
Going out and seeing the Delta IV Heavy on the pad is a truly awe-inspiring experience. Just seeing that amount of raw power right in front of you is just incredible. 3 boosters, our second stage, and then we have a third stage. We're a tiny little spacecraft. We look like a little hood ornament on the top of the Delta IV.
Throughout its 7-year mission, NASA's Parker Solar Probe will swoop through the sun's atmosphere, carrying more than scientific instruments on this historic journey to the center of our solar system. It will also hold a piece of humanity itself. Back in March 2018, the public was invited to submit their names. Over 1 million were loaded into a memory card and mounted on a plaque bearing a dedication to the mission's namesake. Dr. Eugene Parker was a heliophysicist ahead of his time. He proposed this mission back in 1958 after discovering the existence of the dangerous and unpredictable solar wind.
The reason it has taken us 60 years to be able to fly this mission is not because we weren't interested. It really is because it has taken that long for technology to be developed to allow us to do this incredible mission.
During the Parker Solar Probe's perilous dive into the sun's corona, the atmosphere, it will navigate dangers never before experienced by a NASA deep space mission. 3 million-degree plasma, sporadic solar flares, and delayed communication with Earth. Traveling this close is only possible because of the spacecraft's protective heat shield, the single largest piece of hardware and the most critical to mission success. One slight error in its performance could cause the probe to melt and the mission would be lost.
Parker Solar Probe is actually going and touching the sun. When we actually get to our closest approach, the heat shield on Parker Solar Probe will be at about 2,500 degrees Fahrenheit on the front surface. The back surface is going to be at about 600 degrees Fahrenheit, but then the spacecraft bus will just be operating at a normal room temperature almost. It's a little bit higher, about 85 degrees. The previous missions have been really important for solar science as we study from afar, and we can learn a lot from studying from afar. But Parker Solar Probe is actually going and touching, almost kissing the sun, so we can learn so much more.
The spacecraft is now ready for flight, but it can't get millions of miles to the sun unless it gets a boost from a specially made third stage by Northrop Grumman.
The Northrop Grumman third stage team specifically designed and built this third stage for the Parker Solar Probe mission. The Parker Solar Probe needs a third stage because even though the Delta IV Heavy is an incredibly powerful rocket, the third stage is what gets it the extra boost to get into its final orbit around Venus and to the sun.
Parker Solar Probe is the hardest trajectory that I've ever worked on for a couple of different reasons. One, we're flying on the Delta IV Heavy, which is the largest and most complex rocket that Launch Services Program has ever been involved with. And in addition to that, we're flying a third stage that has its own guidance, navigation, and control system on board. So from a trajectory, GNC standpoint, it's like flying 2 missions at once. Parker Solar Probe it's called a heliocentric orbit, which means it's orbiting around the sun. And using a gravity assist, usually we use that to add energy to the spacecraft's orbit when we go out to places like Jupiter or Saturn or Pluto. In this case, we're going in the opposite direction. We're heading inside the orbit of Mercury. The folks at applied physics lab have come up with a very unique trajectory where the spacecraft is going to use the mass of Venus to slow themselves down. And not only are they doing that one time, they're actually going to do that 7 times in a row over a space of 6 years in order to get the spacecraft perihelion, because we're orbiting the sun, down below 10 solar radii. So when we're in orbit around an object, whether it's the Earth or the sun, we go fastest when we're closest to that object and slowest when we get to the top of this orbit. And therefore, when we pass very close to the sun, which is the most massive object in our solar system, we are going approximately 430,000 miles per hour relative to the sun. This really is rocket science.
During the early stages of launch, the Parker Solar Probe will be encapsulated in a large payload fairing. The Delta IV Heavy is a massive rocket designed to launch a school bus-sized spacecraft. The last step at Astrotech is safely securing the 1,510-pound spacecraft in a fairing that, by comparison, makes the probe look small.
To get to the sun, we actually need a lot of energy. Because of that, we need a very large launch vehicle. And in fact, we have the biggest launch vehicle we can get. And because of that, this fairing that is associated with this launch vehicle is very large. But because we're a small spacecraft, we take up a very small amount of space in that fairing. And that's the reason why it looks like we're a very small spacecraft on a very large vehicle. But once the spacecraft is encapsulated, that's it. We no longer get to touch it.
The encapsulated probe is now ready for a slow, steady ride to the launch pad at Cape Canaveral. It will be transported atop a K-Mag made for transporting special payloads. It can hold thousands of pounds, spin 360 degrees, and keep its payload level when traveling up inclines.
One of the nice parts about the K-Mag that we have is it has very precise steering capabilities, and it also has a lot of different steering capabilities. So it gives us a lot of capability to get into a precise location, both for hoisting operations down in the hoistway, as well as different mating operations in our horizontal integration facility.
Now, the ULA team will carefully lift the Parker Solar Probe safely nestled inside its payload fairing to mate it atop the massive Delta IV rocket. To keep the payload safe during the entire lifting operation, there's a special channel constructed in the tower itself known as the hoistway that allows the payload to be lifted without any influence from adverse weather or environmental conditions.
The exciting part about today is it's when we finally get the customer out here, we get the spacecraft hoisted, and that's what it's all been about. A heavy mission by itself is always exciting, but then you add in the factor of having a NASA exploration mission, the mission to touch the sun. That, accompanied with the heavy, it's just an exciting launch for the public, a great exciting launch for ULA. It'll be a lot of fun to see, and it'll be a lot of fun to track over the next several years as it gets into its final orbit around the sun.
NASA's Launch Services Program has now brought together the payload and its ride to space. After taking different roads to the launch pad, finally the spacecraft and the vehicle are together.
Goddard runs all of the Living with a Star missions, and this is what's called a flagship mission. It's one of the most important things that our science does. So the anticipation of launch is just tremendous. I've been working on this project for 10 years, and now to see it actually ready to go is just a tremendous feeling. It's really hard to describe.
Now, as T0 is just days away, it's up to ULA and LSP to make sure they're operating as one. In the hours before liftoff, the mobile service tower gantry rolls back, leaving the mighty Delta IV standing on its own, ready for launch. The final countdown to T0 is underway.
As the NASA launch director, ultimately what I do is give the go or the no-go. That's a very simple statement, but there's a lot that goes behind that. It's a culmination of a bunch of professionals that know their jobs, they know it well, and all I have to do is make sure all those pieces are in place. Then it's easy for me to make the decision to launch.
Thousands of rockets have launched from Florida's Space Coast, but this is the first designed to fly to the sun. Big Delta IV Heavy rocket is ready to roar to life with more than 2 million pounds of thrust to power the Parker Solar
on there.
I'm astronaut Chris Cassidy. Thanks for being part of Expedition 63.
Go. Locks. Go. Launch director.
You have permission to launch.
Status check. Go Delta. Go PSP.
3, 2, 1, 0. Liftoff of the mighty Delta IV Heavy rocket with NASA's Parker Solar Probe, a daring mission to shed light on the mysteries of our closest star, the Sun.
All 3 RS-68s look good in the full thrust mode. Response looks good. Vehicle trajectory looking good, right down the middle of the range track.
Exploring the universe is a daunting task. There are often immense challenges that must be overcome before even setting out on a mission. The Ionospheric Connection Explorer, or ICON, has faced multiple barriers that have delayed its journey to study the frontier of space, the dynamic zone high in our atmosphere, where Earth's weather meets space weather. But before we can reap the benefits of its scientific research, ICON must launch successfully. The ICON team's can-do spirit will be repeatedly pushed to its limits while striving for a long-awaited and hard-earned T0.
A successful space launch requires flawless execution of a highly complex machine.
The third stage's lower skirt jettison. That was targeted to come off at 4 minutes 56 seconds into launch. We're already past 5 minutes and 20 seconds. Third stage now going to continue to burn until we're at. And then after the suit up, they move into this next room, which has a pane of glass. This is typically where we would see crew members after going through a pressure check, get a chance to speak with friends, family that were able to travel to the launch site, and also some personnel. We do see some NASA personnel there as Tricia Mack and John McBride. Tricia Mack, the head of the NASA office in Moscow, coordinating all of the activities for crews flying and returning in Soyuz spacecraft. John McBride helping out with the astronaut office over there as well. And those are two of really the main individuals that are there at the launch. Again, typically you see a larger contingent, family, friends able to travel to Baikonur, not able to do it this time around with all of the travel restrictions. But this room still serves a very important purpose. This is where they actually go through a pressure check of the suit itself, so you'll actually see it. It gets plugged in, they get into a seat that's a mold essentially, or a mock-up of the Soyuz seat itself, and you can see Ivanishin in there, and his suit actually puffs up a little bit. They're pressurizing it, so they're feeding breathing gas, typically using a nitrox mixture. So a similar composition of what we have in our atmosphere down here on Earth, getting fed into the suits, and it's able to provide pressure as well. And again, these suits worn for all of the dynamic phases of a flight. So all of the launch and ascent, all of the rendezvous operations with the station, and then they will be in these exact same suits when they make their way home at the end of their mission for a deorbit and landing. One interesting note about the suits, this is a mock-up of the seats. This is a mock-up of the seat. Each of the crew members on board the Soyuz has a specially molded seat liner. They actually sit in basically a gutted-out version of what you can see Vagner in right now, and a plaster mold is poured all around them to conform to their body, and they get a special seat liner that is then installed in the seat, and that's why every single crew member also has they have assigned seats. Chris Cassidy's in the right seat today. The left seater, also known as the board engineer in the Soyuz spacecraft, is essentially the backup for the center seat where the Soyuz commander sits. Soyuz commander prime for all of the vehicle's operations, for manual control of the vehicle, should they have to take over for the rendezvous and docking, or any of the other phases of the flight. And again, one by one, the crew's going through, getting a chance to do these pressure checks. We won't be seeing, again, the interaction through the glass. Pretty much all of the media, most of the crew family, spouses, children, and even a lot of the industry officials weren't permitted to travel to the launch zone for this. Just again, always keeping the health and safety of the crew paramount in all of the planning. Again, those individuals in the room are required to either maintain the exact same quarantine as the crew, or wear a lot of the PPE, the personal protective equipment, in order to interact with them. This is a standard procedure for every single space station crew launching to the International Space Station. It's called health stabilization. It's been around as long as we've been doing these long duration flights.
Как настроение, как готовность? Хорошо. Мы провели заседание Государственной комиссии сегодня рано утром. Проверили все технические службы. Все идет по плану, все нормально, поэтому готовимся к пуску в назначенное время. И что хочу сказать. Желаю вам успешного старта и полета.
I wish you successful launch and good luck, guys. You've done everything you could during your training. Everything's nominal on board, everything's nominal with the launch vehicle. Everything's going to be nominal. And I, guys, wanted to ask you, please don't break anything on board. And the equipment will work well if you don't break it. Despite everything, you are keeping your cool, and there is no rush. Slow and steady makes it.
This is your day. You worked so hard to get here, and I hope everything goes absolutely perfectly. Enjoy every moment. Enjoy your new home station, and know that we are all here on the ground supporting you and welcoming you home in October. Take care.
Irkut, this is Baikonur launch lead. Please adjust your shoulder straps and lower straps.
And after those leak checks and getting a chance to talk to a number of officials, among them Dmitry Rogozin, Sergei Krikalev, and NASA's Trisha Mack, the crew is ready to walk out. Individuals gathered for the final walk down. They come up and salute the head of the Roscosmos, Dmitry Rogozin, there on the right.
To the head of the State Commission, the commander of the Soyuz crew reporting. We are ready. Good luck.
Again, maintaining the tradition, one final time declaring they're ready for launch, and then they're on their way to the bus, waving a thumbs up there from Chris Cassidy, and then they get on the ride to pad 31.
Отходим. Как неудобно одного тень космонавта.
And then once the crew arrived at pad 31, again, officials from their respective space agencies able to lead them to the final steps before they make their way up to the elevator, taking them to the top of the Soyuz booster. Again, about 160 feet tall, the Soyuz spacecraft sitting on top inside of a protective launch shroud.
Ivan.
Again, they were able to climb up those stairs, wave goodbye to the final well-wishers there at the pad, ride the elevator up to the top of the Soyuz to board the capsule, and as of this moment, they've been on board for about 2 hours. In fact, just before we came on the air, at about 1:53 a.m., they were getting ready to step through their leak checks on their spacesuits. They, about 5 minutes later, reported that they had completed all the leak checks on the hatches of the Soyuz spacecraft, and the crew kicked off those leak checks, closing their visors and pressurizing their suits. And we'll be getting a couple of views inside the cabin throughout our coverage and the ride uphill this morning. Right now, the crew, last time we checked in, had their visors back open, but we'll see those get closed right before the launch begins. And as mentioned earlier, the road to this launch has been anything but normal, a little unusual, and it began with our cosmonauts, Ivanishin and Vagner, who were previously the backup crew, finding out that they were launching on this Soyuz spacecraft, and that occurred just a few weeks before the final training began, or the final training exams began, which ended up turning out to be pretty good timing.
Of course, it was a surprise. We thought that we would be flying in October 2020, but life happens. And any backup crew is ready to become prime. And sometimes it actually happened at Baikonur. But we were lucky. We had some time for the news to actually settle in.
And just like Ivanishin mentioned, they, along with Chris Cassidy, have been training for this mission for a few years now, and they were very prepared, ready to fill in these roles, even under the unusual circumstances. There were some increased health and safety precautions that were put in place over the last several weeks. Again, though, thankfully we have a very robust health stabilization plan in place, so not too much needed to change with the crew themselves. But some of the traditional pre-launch activities had to be restructured, shortened, or even replaced, all just to ensure that we had a very thorough quarantine condition for the crew.
Well, it's been interesting. Life for us in the pre-launch period is always in quarantine. So for me, I knew I was going to be in quarantine these 2 weeks. But what's really different is everybody else around us is in quarantine too, just like the rest of the world. And to see the impacts on that in terms of who from NASA can come over to support launch, even which the Russian operational support team will be much smaller. My family and launch guests will not be able to come. So it'll be a really, really skeletal crew there in the Baikonur Cosmodrome, which will be quite different.
Look at you once in a day, it's all wrong, but it's all right. And I love her. God knows I love her. Kentucky woman, she gets to know you. She goes to own you. Kentucky woman. She ain't the kind that gets turned at the drop of a name. Something inside that you got to turn your own just the same. And she loves me. God knows she loves me. Kentucky woman. She gets to know you. She goes to own you. Kentucky woman. I don't want much. Good Lord, they're beneath my feet. Gentle touch from that one girl, and life is tender. Ain't no doubt. I'm talking about Kentucky woman. She gets to know you.
All right, and we're back at the launch pad now. You can see the gantry arms beginning to pull back that service structure, providing access to the rocket itself. One of the final tasks down there at the pad before we're ready for launch. The rocket that you're looking at right now went through all the standard preparations earlier this week. The spacecraft itself was mated to the booster. The three main stages were all joined together. And then on Monday, the Soyuz rocket began its trek to the launch pad, where it was raised to its vertical position for final pre-launch preparations. And this is some video from, again, earlier this week on Monday. The Soyuz going out business end first from the integration and mating facility, and it's a much shorter path than you might have seen from previous launches that went from pad number 1, Gagarin's start, as we are again using pad 31 this time for the first time since a crew including astronaut Shane Kimbrough launched from it back in October of 2016. All this because we are on this new Soyuz 2.1A booster. It's just an upgraded version of the Soyuz rocket that's been used to carry crew members into space for over 50 years now. The Soyuz itself sits high above the 3 stages of that Soyuz booster, which uses kerosene, a highly refined version of kerosene, commonly referred to as rocket fuel, and liquid oxygen as the propellant. The first stage itself has 4 liquid engines. The first stage itself has 4 liquid engines that are strapped to the side of the core vehicle. Each one of those is going to burn for about 1 minute and 58 seconds before they drop away.
Select on the first input panel.
And then the core engine itself also serves as the second stage.
Please do not switch the input.
And we'll see that core stage continue to burn until about 4 minutes, 37 seconds into today's flight. Then the third stage has a single engine. We'll see that ignite just before it separates from the second stage. They do something called hot staging. There's actually a lattice work structure between the second and third stages that allows the exhaust from the rocket itself to expel out as it's igniting, still attached to the second stage. That third stage will help push it away safely, and then that will burn until 8 minutes and 46 seconds into today's flight. At that point, the Soyuz spacecraft will separate from the third stage, and it will be in its preliminary orbit. And as mentioned at the start of our show, we did say we were going to try and get to some of your questions, so we can go through a couple of those right now. Again, if you do have a question for today's launch, docking, or hatch opening coverage, you can send it in on Twitter using the hashtag AskNASA. So first, we'll start off with one from Vishnu Sarath, who wanted to know at what time after the launch will the abort tower be ejected. That launch escape tower is jettisoned at 1 minute 54 seconds into the flight, but that is not the only piece of the launch escape system. There are also solid rocket motors on the capsule fairing itself that can be used after the tower is jettisoned to still pull the vehicle away. In fact, those were the ones that were used back on October 11, 2018, when the Soyuz MS-10 spacecraft carrying Nick Hague and Alexei Ovchinin encountered a launch escape. And so, again, just to answer you, 1 minute 54 seconds. Our next one comes from Sai, who wanted to know if the station crew get to keep their phones on board the ISS. They don't bring their phones with them. Your cell phone here on planet Earth relies on ground station towers in order to communicate, and they're a little too high up for those to work. They do have basically a voice over IP phone, so a phone that uses data using the data streams that also send telemetry, data, video, everything from the International Space Station, and they're able to call people here on Earth. It actually works just like voice over IP, and they can just dial cell phone numbers here on Earth, and they can call you from space. And so we'll just do those two for now, and we will get to a little bit more a little bit later in today's launch. For now, though, let's keep on going through. Let's take a look at the Soyuz spacecraft, which it's still encased in that shroud. We'll see it in space a little bit later when it arrives at the International Space Station. But going through some quick facts, the Soyuz, 23.5 feet long, weighing in at 15,650 pounds, and is comprised of 3 different modules. The one right in the middle, that's the descent module, and that contains all the customized seats for the crew, all the controls and displays necessary for the flight, should the Crew need to take control and fly the Soyuz spacecraft, also just giving them insight into all of its systems, both on the spacecraft and the rocket. Also has all of the life support systems, batteries for re-entry and landing, and the parachutes and the soft landing rocket engines that are used to slow the Soyuz just before touchdown when they land in Kazakhstan. The descent module weighs 6,393 pounds and can carry about 110 pounds of payload that can be returned back down to Earth with the module, usually bringing down some cold samples, blood samples, things like that with the crew when they return. And that is, most importantly, the only portion of the Soyuz that has a heat shield, so it's able to survive the fiery re-entry through Earth's atmosphere. The orbital module's up on top. That connects to the descent module via a pressurized hatch. There's a hatchway between it and the descent module that the crew can get through. It has a small amount of room inside that they can move around during the flight to station. On the very top, it has that docking mechanism, the hatch, and also the rendezvous antennas located at the very front end. There's also a forward-looking window they're able to look out, and they can take manual measurements as they're on final approach to the International Space Station. You can use a laser rangefinder in the event that they have any issues with their automated rendezvous system. Then at the bottom there is the propulsion of the instrumentation module that has all of the oxygen storage tanks, the main engine, the attitude control thrusters, avionics and communications and control equipment. The propulsion portion of the module handles all the orbital maneuvers, so it has those engines that are needed for the rendezvous with the space station, and also the deorbit burn at the end of the spacecraft's mission. And then before they are deployed, there are two solar arrays, which give the Soyuz a wingspan of about 35 feet. Right now they're folded against the body of the propulsion module. Once they get into space, we'll see them unfurl and start providing electrical power to the station systems. Both the propulsion module and the orbital module actually separate from the descent module after the deorbit burn at the end of a mission, and they burn up in the Earth's atmosphere. The entire spacecraft serving not only as the transport vehicle to and from the station, but it actually acts as their emergency return vehicle, so their lifeboat essentially, should the crew need to leave the station unexpectedly. For every crew member on board, you always have a seat in a spacecraft for them docked to the space station. Just checking in, we are 22 minutes, 20 seconds and counting to today's launch. The crew at this point, again, had already conducted their suit leak checks. They're just standing by now at this point until we get to that launch point. The crew going through all those pre-launch procedures inside the capsule. We're still continuing on with this countdown for today. Once they leave the Earth's atmosphere a little bit later this morning, this is going to be the third trip into space for NASA's Chris Cassidy. And before heading back into orbit, he spent
school with him and sit in his class all day just to see the different things that we got to do. And so that is really what gave me the love for science and math as I was a young kid.
My mom took me to every science museum you can imagine. She was so involved.
Part of that, I guess, as a child, was my dad was a geologist, and so I kind of just grew up hiking the mountains, looking at rocks, and talking about science.
I first got interested in science really as a kid, just playing in the backyard.
I was always interested in math and science, and my mom really encouraged that. My dad's an engineer, and that was inspiring to me.
And then as I got older, I started taking some courses, these after-school programs for both math and science at the local college. I showed interest in math and science when I was young, and I was able to continue that interest in STEM through school and internship.
And you just heard the crew told 5 minutes readiness. We are 10 minutes away from launch. They're going to close their visors now on their SOCA launch and entry suits.
Baikonur launch lead, we confirm our visors are closed. Irkutsk, this is Baikonur launch lead. Copy. And you are ready.
And we are under 8 minutes and 30 seconds away from launch. Once we hit that 7-minute mark, the pre-launch operations will be complete. We pretty much get into game time. That's when things will start to pick up. We'll go through a couple more manual steps, including inserting the launch key into the launch bunker, something that never gets old saying and is one of my favorite little tidbits about space flight, that they have an actual launch key. And they'll get that inserted at about T-minus 6 seconds, so we'll hear the call out launch key inserted. You will be continually hearing an interpretation of the chatter between the launch conductors there in Baikonur, the team in Mission Control Moscow, and the crew. So you'll hear one voice, that's our interpreter's voice, so if it sounds like someone is talking to themselves, that is one person having both sides of the conversation. Here's a view of Chris Cassidy. Again, he's in the right seat today. This is going to be his 3rd trip into outer space. We heard the crew call that their visors are closed, and you can see them there in their seats.
Irkutsk, this is Baikonur launch lead. We are at L-1 minute. And I will be reading out the numbers to you guys. Copy, we confirm L-1 minute.
And throughout the operations today, you're going to be hearing the Soyuz referred to as Irkut, I-R-K-U-T, and that is Anatoly Ivanishin's call sign, paying tribute to his birthplace of Irkutsk.
Irkut 1, everything's nominal on board, and we're ready for launch. We copy Irkut.
Ivanishin reporting everything nominal or normal on board the spacecraft, and they are ready for launch. We are 6 minutes, 22 seconds and counting away from liftoff.
Key to start.
And we have confirmation the launch key has been inserted in the launch bunker that transitions the launch sequence into its automatic mode. So computers on the Soyuz rocket now taking command and stepping through pre-programmed procedures as we count down to launch. Procedures. And just as a reminder, it's Anatoly Ivanishin in the center seat. He's the Soyuz commander. And then at the top of your screen is Ivan Vagner. He's in the left seat. He's the board engineer for today, essentially the backup role for the commander on board the spacecraft. And we'll also get views of Chris Cassidy. He's seated to Ivanishin's right.
Lines purge.
We are under 5 minutes away from launch. Combustion chamber of the engines being purged with nitrogen that helps to fireproof them, or removing any vapors of fuel or oxidizer. And we are now under 4 minutes away from launch. There will be a couple of visual indicators that can help you count down. The first umbilical tower will be separated from the booster at about 35 seconds before launch, but the second and final one separates at 15 seconds before launch. So once you see that second one separate, begin counting down from 15.
Есть дренаж.
And as we come up on 2 minutes and 30 seconds, you just heard the ground propellant feed has been terminated, so fuel and oxidizer no longer being loaded into the vehicle.
Venting confirmed. Repress confirmed.
I mean, right now the booster's fuel tanks are being pressurized. This helps to just optimize and really facilitate the flow of the fuel. Also helps add a little bit of structural support to the rocket itself. We are inside 2 minutes to launch. And at this very moment, the International Space Station passing just overhead. At the moment of launch, though, it'll already be 587 statute miles ahead of the Soyuz spacecraft, flying just over northeast Kazakhstan, but just passed right over pad 31 there at the Baikonur cosmodrome. 1 minute and 20 seconds to launch. T-minus 1 minute.
Земля, борт.
Confirm. Space to ground.
And we see that first umbilical tower separating. That means we're 35 seconds away from launch.
Launch.
And there goes the second tower, so we are 15 seconds away from launch. We're going to see the boosters at the bottom light up, and as their thrust builds, it'll eventually overcome.
Intermediate. Main one.
And liftoff. Cassidy, Ivanishin, and Vagner on their way to the International Space Station.
Seconds into flight, all parameters are nominal. We confirm on board, all parameters are nominal. 20 seconds into launch, thrusters are working nominally. The crew is feeling fine. 30 seconds. All parameters for the vehicle are nominal. The crew is feeling fine. 40 seconds into flight. Thrusters are working nominally and the vehicle is nominal.
Getting good continuous calls from the crew and the ground, everything with the vehicle looking nominal. The first stage powering the Soyuz upward, delivering 930,000 pounds of thrust from the 4 strap-on boosters in that single core engine.
Roll and yaw at 60 minutes into flight.
The yaw pitch roll, the attitude or which way it's pointing, hearing all those parameters or the status of it nominal.
70 seconds into flight. Everything's fine with the vehicle on our side. We confirm we're feeling good.
Again, this first stage going to continue to burn for just about 2 minutes into the flight. So just under a minute to go on the first stage.
90 seconds into flight. Thrusters are working nominally. We confirm and we're feeling well on board.
Soyuz continuing to retreat from view, already traveling well in excess of 1,100 miles per hour.
We confirm.
And seeing the Koryoff cross there as those strap-on boosters separate. The first stage separating right on time.
We also confirm lateral unit separation.
Their job done, they drop weight at an altitude of about 28 statute miles. The Soyuz traveling at about 3,300 miles an hour.
Vehicle stabilization is nominal. Everything's fine on board.
And with the first stage in the launch escape tower now jettisoned, being powered by that second stage, the core stage.
We confirm the jettisoning of the
The shroud jettison and getting some views now from the Soyuz spacecraft itself, looking back towards the Soyuz rocket. You have a solar array right in front of your view there. The launch shroud has been jettisoned, so the Soyuz spacecraft now exposed.
70 seconds into flight. The vehicle is fine, and we are feeling well on board. This is Irkutsk.
Everything looking good with that core stage. The second stage,
190 minutes.
56 feet in length, 13.5 in diameter, has a single engine with 4 fuel chambers, provides between 178,000 and 222,000 pounds of thrust, depending on their altitude, for its 3 minutes and 28 seconds of operation. Again, the second stage is going to continue to burn. We're looking for second stage shutdown at about 4 minutes, 30 seconds after launch.
Parameters of the vehicle are nominal. We confirm we are feeling well.
seconds.
230 seconds into flight. The vehicle is stable. We copy and we confirm everything's nominal on board.
So we're a little over 4 minutes since launch. Again, we'll be looking for that shutdown and separation coming up in about 20 seconds. And as that separation occurs, the third stage will begin firing. It's called a hot stage technique. And that third stage will ignite while the second is still attached. And standing by for second stage shutdown.
We confirm separation of stage 2. We see it as well. Everything's nominal on board. Copy.
And we have confirmation second stage shutdown and separated, and you saw a piece fly off. That was the third stage's lower skirt jettison. That was targeted to come off at 4 minutes 56 seconds into launch. We're already past 5 minutes and 20 seconds. Third stage now going to continue to burn until we're at our orbital insertion, so the initial orbit of the Soyuz spacecraft. That's expected to come at about 8 minutes and 46 seconds at shutdown, and then the separation coming just 4 seconds later.
Into flight, and the thrusters are working nominally. We confirm, and everything's nominal on board.
So right now, the Soyuz being propelled into orbit by the single engine of the third stage, providing 67,000 pounds of thrust, going to continue to burn until shutdown, coming in just under 3 minutes from now.
360 seconds into flight. Your pitch and roll are all nominal. Copy, and we are feeling well on board.
Still getting great updates from the crew. Anatoly Ivanishin talking to the ground. Everyone feeling well on board. Yaw, pitch, roll. The engines all performing nominally. That's the word we want to keep hearing. It means everything's going normally according to the plan. 6 minutes, 35 seconds since liftoff.
390 seconds into flight. All control systems for the vehicle are working nominally. And we confirm we are fine on board. Copy. .420 seconds into flight. Your pitch and roll parameters are all nominal. Copy. We are fine on board.
And we just passed 7 minutes and 30 seconds into this flight.
450.
Spacecraft velocity right around 13,500 miles an hour.
Confirm. Irkutsk inaudible. We copy Irkutsk.
This
470 seconds into flight. Third stage thrusters are working nominally. Everything's well on board. .490 seconds into flight. The vehicle is stable.
And we're standing by. Our next major milestone is going to be the shutdown of that third stage coming in about 20 seconds from now.
On board. Thank you for your support. 510 seconds into flight. Your pitch and roll are all nominal. Get ready for the stage separation.
So we'll see the engines cut off, and once the vehicle separates, it usually gives the crew a bit of a jolt. Then the Soyuz will be flying free. We see the third stage separating there. And we can see it dropping away now. Third stage separation confirmed.
And congratulations, guys. You are in orbit. I am handing you over to the Mission Control, Moscow.
And as we can see on the video here, that solar array deployed. We have confirmation the one on the other side also deployed, along with what's known as the appendages. All of the antennas, so the rendezvous and the communication antennas, all deployed on the Soyuz spacecraft.
Then we will be standing by for the first measurement, and then please proceed to page 39. MCC Moscow, this is Irkutsk 2. I am ready to give you.
So we'll stick with these views in the Soyuz as long as we still have them. They'll begin passing out of the range of the ground stations where we're able to get this video transmitted down eventually.
And I am.
But everything looking like they're good in a good initial orbit. The orbital parameters, so looking at both speed and then their apogee, perigee, the orbit that they're in, looking good after a successful separation from that third stage. So with that, Chris Cassidy, Anatoly Ivanishin, and Ivan Vagner are in outer space.
23rd, 327.
For Cassidy and Ivanishin, this is their third trip. For Vagner, his first. The crew now going through a number of their initial orbital checkouts. Again, one of the major things that we always look for is getting those solar arrays out, which provide all the electrical power to the systems on board the Soyuz spacecraft. Also, the antennas being deployed, and those were all confirmed to be done successfully, and we were able to get a view of one of those solar arrays popping out just shortly after that separation from the third stage.
And we confirm that we are ready to activate Control Panel 2. You have our go. Control Panel 2 is activated. And we are starting with Course 2 test. Copy.
And one of the first tests that they're going to be carrying out is a test of the CORS system. The CORS is the automated rendezvous and docking system that the Soyuz uses. It's able to fly autonomously all the way to the space station and then autonomously dock to the International Space Station itself. And so they're running through a checkout of that system. Once they get closer, they'll do system checks between the Soyuz and the station itself before they get in close for the eventual station keeping and then docking to the station. And their destination today is going to be the Poisk module, also known as the Mini Research Module number 2. And it's on the space-facing side of the Zvezda service module over on the Russian segment.
And please turn on the input panel at 12:36. We copy. We wanted to confirm, MCC Moscow, that course 2 test was successful, and we are proceeding with course 1 activation. All KDU sections switch over should be done per page 52, Irkutsk. And the switchover is at 12:10. We copy 12:10. And the next times for the SR altitude is 11:52 up to 12:06. Copy. And course 1 activation went successfully.
Иркуты, в следующем сеансе связи мы с вами будем проводить тест ручного управления.
And Irkutsk, during our next COM session, we are going to be testing manual controls. And please send command IKV inhibits at 12:39:00. Copy. IKV inhibits at 12:39. MCC Moscow, this is Irkutsk 2. I have verified that all displays are working nominally. We're also standing by for a 5-minute measurement. MCC Moscow, we confirm attitude built. MCC Moscow, this is Irkutsk 2. 5-minute measurement. We are ready. SI is 05827. Instrumentation compartment 729. We copy.
And this is Mission Control Houston. If you're just now joining us, you've missed the best part. The launch was done successfully on time. We'll be bringing you some launch replays in just a little bit. But for right now, the crew on orbit in outer space in their Soyuz spacecraft. They're again stepping through all of the initial checkouts of the various systems, doing a check of the Core's automated rendezvous and docking system, doing a leak check on the spacecraft itself. And they're monitoring all of these tests using those computer displays directly in front of the commander seat.
Ребят, как слышите меня?
Guys, how do you copy me? We read you loud and clear. Congratulations to you with such a successful insertion into orbit and launch. And we see it on our side on GPS that It was a success, and I would like to confirm that we are going to stay with the 6 orbit docking plan. All in all, everything's looking good. Just slow and steady makes it. We copy all. Thank you. And please do as I taught you to. Copy.
And one important part from that conversation we were just listening in on, they are still continuing with this 6-hour rendezvous with the International Space Station, so everything looking good with the spacecraft and those initial checkouts, meaning they should be on time for a docking today, which we're currently tracking to 9:15 a.m. Central Time.
Irkut, MCC Moscow. Go ahead, this is Irkut 1. You have a go to open your visors, deactivate thermal sensors, and perform actions in the block on page 37. Copy. We'll put it in work. This is Ivan Sevastianov. Congratulations, guys, on such a successful launch. Good luck. Talk to you soon. Thank you.
And the crew just getting some final congratulations from flight controllers in Koryov, just outside of Moscow at the Russian Mission Control Center, who are going to be taking the lead for overseeing the operations of the Soyuz spacecraft for the rest of its journey. While we stand by for those launch replays, we do have some replays of the in-cabin views that we weren't able to show during that initial ascent. So this again, just moments ago, as they lifted off. It's already been almost 20 minutes since liftoff. It's Ivanishin, Anatoly Ivanishin, the Soyuz commander, in the center seat there at the top of your screen. Ivan Vagner making his first ride into orbit. At the time of this replay, they were actually under the full power of the Soyuz first stage. And you can see just how smooth the ride is uphill for these crew members inside. And again, just out of view, NASA astronaut Chris Cassidy in space for the 3rd time now. And if you're just now joining us, this is video from just minutes ago when they did launch. That launch came 21 minutes and 20 seconds ago. This is the in-cabin view, looking at Anatoly Ivanishin there at the bottom left corner. And Ivan Vagner, big smile on his face as he made his first ride uphill into outer space today. Right now, the crew is still inside the Soyuz capsule, performing all those initial on-orbit checkouts. At this point, they've been given the go to open up their visors on their suits, also getting reminders to deactivate some thermal sensors on the Soyuz spacecraft itself, and then getting ready to extend the docking probe and doing a hand controller test. They have a hand controller in front of the commander's seat, able to actually control the Soyuz spacecraft itself, although if we go per the nominal plan, everything's just going to be done automated using that Coors rendezvous and docking system. That antenna was confirmed to have deployed shortly after the vehicle separated from the Soyuz rocket, along with the solar arrays. So again, just standing by for a few moments for those launch replays. We should be bringing them to you shortly. And here we go. These are replays. That launch came right on time at 3:05 a.m. Central Time, 4:05 a.m. Eastern. Soyuz MS-16 spacecraft taking off on the Soyuz rocket from pad 31. And these replays will cycle through a few different views of the rocket for you. At another replay, we'll stand by. We should have it, hopefully at least one more replay of that launch, which again came right on time, 3:05 a.m. Central, just about 25 minutes ago. While we do stand by, we did get confirmation that the docking probe, so that extends from the very top of the Soyuz spacecraft out of the orbital module, and that's used to do the final alignment into the docking compartment on the Poise module, where they're going to be headed today. That was extended successfully, so all of the on-orbit checkouts continuing to go per the plan. We should be just under 20 minutes away from one of the first major firings of the engines on the instrumentation or the propulsion module of the Soyuz spacecraft, known as the DV-1 burn, a delta velocity #1 burn. And that'll be the first in a series of firings to gradually raise the Soyuz's orbit until it gets on the same level as the space station, currently orbiting an altitude of about 257 statute miles. And here we go, one more launch replay from just about 26 minutes ago.
Sensation on 2 for Soyuz launch. Looked like a perfect launch and orbital insertion to us. We got a little peak out the cupola.
All right, and that'll do it for our replays of today's successful launch. While we were going into that third one, though, we actually did get a call down from the International Space Station. NASA astronaut Drew Morgan, one of the current residents on board, reported that they just watched the launch, and with everything looking good, they were ready to receive the crew members, and did mention that he's going to have dinner waiting for them. So both he and Jessica Meir and Alex Skoropochka just coming out of their sleep period, so this is bright and early in the morning for them. And in just about 6 hours from now, they're going to have 3 new crew members that they're going to be welcoming on board. But with that, we are going to take a break for now while the Soyuz continues to fine-tune its path towards the International Space Station over the next several hours. But we will, of course, be back for live coverage once we're here and ready for docking. So just coming up on NASA TV, we'll do a video file of the post-launch, just giving you, again, some more views of the launch and all of the major events from this morning's activities so far. And then we'll be back with our live coverage at 8:30 a.m. Central Time, 9:30 a.m. Eastern, for a planned docking at 9:16 a.m. The hatch opening coverage will come just a few hours after docking. After they dock, they do a series of leak checks, and then they get ready to open the hatches and move into the station. So we'll begin that hatch opening coverage at 11 a.m. Central. The hatch opening targeted to come right around 11:30 a.m. Then we will wrap up today's coverage with a video file showing all of the highlights from docking and the hatch opening at 2 p.m. Central, 3 p.m. Eastern. So be sure to tune back in then. Keep sending those questions using the hashtag AskNASA on Twitter. We'll have plenty of time to answer those as we move through the docking and the hatch opening show a little bit later this morning. And I do want to thank everyone for either staying up late or waking up early to tune in and watch this launch today. It was a rough time for everyone, so we truly appreciate it. So with that, we will go ahead and sign off. We'll be back in a few hours. This is Mission Control Houston.
It was plagued by bad omens and bad luck from the very beginning.
13, we've got one more item for you when you get a chance. We'd like it to stir up your cryo tanks.
It never really converged to the point where you felt you really had total control of what was going on.
Okay, Houston, we've had a problem here.
Space Station, as both vehicles are flying over the South Pacific to the southeast of Australia, and right now they are about 273 statute miles in altitude. Soyuz, already inside of 8 kilometers away from the station, it's closing the gap between itself and the orbiting laboratory at a rate of about 11 meters per second. Everything has gone smoothly so far with all of our different burns, our delta velocity burns, 4 of those done to successfully raise the station's orbit following a successful launch earlier today. All the impulse burns fine-tuning the path towards the station, also going according to plan. So that's our ground track. Right now they are in an orbital nighttime, but as you can see, as they morning, and good afternoon one final time from Mission Control Houston, and welcome to our live coverage of the hatch opening of the Soyuz MS-16 spacecraft, currently docked to the International Space Station, as we get ready to welcome 3 new crew members aboard the orbiting laboratory. Once more, we're coming to you live from the Flight Control Room number 1, Ficker 1, the usual space station flight control room here at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. Inside the room right now, still the Orbit 2 team, and they are being led today by Flight Director Pooja Jazrani. She's right there in the middle of your screen. She's going by the call sign of Unity Flight. She's coordinating all of the teams here in Houston, responsible for overseeing the systems on board the International Space Station. Just above her is NASA astronaut Jessica Watkins. She's serving as the Capcom for this shift. She'll be the voice communication link between our teams here in Houston and the crew on board. And just a quick update, the crew is stepping through all of their final leak checks. Following a successful docking, they kick off essentially about 2 hours of leak checks and vestibule pressurization. So they actually fill that space between the Soyuz spacecraft and the station hatch, which is normally exposed to the vacuum of space with atmosphere. And once that gets pressurized, they have to equalize that. So you have to have equal pressure in that vestibule on board the Soyuz spacecraft and on the station before you can get those hatches open, and obviously making sure there are no leaks in any of the seals between the vehicle and the spacecraft. So we're still going through those leak checks. We have a couple more minutes to go until they get some final pressure readings, and then we'll begin that equalization process, and then there's a couple of minutes on the end of that as well. We were initially targeting a hatch open time of right around 11:15 a.m. Central Time. We'll slide around with that as the pressure checks continue on. The crew on board the Soyuz spacecraft, though, are on the other side of this hatch that we're looking at right now. They are NASA astronaut Chris Cassidy and Russian cosmonauts Anatoly Ivanishin and Ivan Vagner. He's there on the right, Ivanishin in the center, the Soyuz commander, and on the right, or on the left, NASA astronaut Chris Cassidy. And in just a couple of minutes, they're going to be joining the Expedition 62 crew on board the station with 2 NASA astronauts, Jessica Meir and Andrew Morgan, and Oleg Skropochka. They've all been on board for different times. Drew Morgan's actually been on board for about 263 days, and then Christina and Oleg have been on board for just over 197 days. They're scheduled to remain on board the station for about another week, and then they'll be coming home. And then the crew that just arrived today will be the only ones on board until we get another human space flight launch. The next one on our schedule is going to be that Demo 2 flight, currently targeted for mid to late May. And that'll be bringing Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley up to the station. But for now, we are standing by for this hatch opening. You're getting a look inside of the Poisk module, and you're going to see Oleg Skropochka, the current station commander, floating into view. He's just there at the bottom. He's been setting up the camera and getting the hatch ready on the station side. There are 2 hatches that we'll see open. First, we'll see him open the station hatch, and that'll actually reveal the very top of the Soyuz spacecraft, where we were looking at it in the vacuum of space just a few hours ago. The docking probe and the other antennas located around it. It's currently attached. The docking probe has been retracted. And then once these leak checks are complete, we'll be able to get these hatches open and the crew on board.
Copy 732. This is the ISS pressure. All right, step 10.9.3, RPV 1. Airflow regulator 1 is closed. Vanya, Ivan, could you please send S5 command? Yes, please send S5 command, and then in 1 minute send S6 command. S5 issued at 19:04:45, and I confirm that LED is illuminated.
visiting vehicle officer here in Mission Control Houston. Tom Erkenswick today is leading the team of flight controllers, both a support team here in Houston and over in Moscow, getting data and feedback from the Russian flight control team and feeding that to the flight controllers here in Houston in Ficker 1. Just hearing that the leak checks have been completed. Now they're beginning the pressure equalization step. So you need to make sure that you have equal pressure on both the station and the Soyuz hatch sides, and then also in that vestibule, that space in between. And then once those pressures are equal or within a tolerable range of being equal, they'll be able to actually get these hatches open. So leak checks in the rear view, equalization on board now, and following that will be hatch opening.
Open, ККЦ, no stop. Stand by. Okay, copy, standing by. All right, so stand by for ISS hatch opening. All right, standing by.
And again, the first hatch we expect to be open will be on the station side. There are two hatches, one on the station, one on the Soyuz. Oleg Skropochka there in the Poisk module will first open up the station side hatch. Looks like he's getting into position to start that maneuver now. And then after they finalize the pressurization, equalization between the Soyuz and the station, they'll be able to open up the Soyuz hatch. In the time since they've docked, in addition to doing all of these leak checks, the crew able to get out of their Sokol launch and entry suits that they've been wearing since suiting up prior to their launch. And there we see the station side hatch is open. And looking at the very top of the orbital module on the Soyuz now.
Irkut, this is Moscow. You go to proceed with step 10.9.3, the actions that are in the box. Okay, copy all, opening ККТ and КВД valves. Yes, go ahead and open ККТ valve and КВД as well. Okay, so we're going to repress the ISS with the air. Irkut, did you open ККТ and КВД valves?
And having a quick handover, so quick transition in our audio, video, and telemetry reception with the station as we hand over between the tracking and data relay satellites that deliver all of that data from the station back down to us on the ground. You're getting split box views of the Russian Mission Control Center in Koryov just outside of Moscow. They've been overseeing all of the operations from the Soyuz MS-16 vehicle today from launch all the way through this docking and now hatch opening. On the right, a look inside of Ficker 1. The Orbit 2 team still on console. They've been on board since a couple of hours before the actual docking, overseeing all the final preparations of the station. Again, Flight Director Pooja Jesvrani leading the team this morning.
Please be ready to note it down, and I will tell you what the recommendation is. Okay, ready to copy now. Ready to copy? Yes. So first of all, you will have to deactivate the Soyuz. This is orbital flight ODF, page 25-38, step 4. Orbital flight 25 through 28, step 4. Yes, that's affirmative. Second item, do not deactivate the gas analyzer. Orbital flight ODF, page 36, step 4.5 is not to be executed. Orbital flight, page 36, step 4.5 is not to be executed, and gas analyzer is not to be deactivated. That's correct. Next item, you will have to change out the cartridge in the sub, page 35, 4.3. So you're supposed to switch pair 1 with pair 3. Page 35, step 4.3. And what's next? So replace pair 1 with pair 3. Is that correct? Yes. Affirmative.
So while the crew inside the Soyuz continues to step through these final equalization procedures, let's take a couple of moments. You guys have been sending in questions on Twitter using that hashtag AskNASA ever since our launch this morning. We'll try and burn through a couple here real quick. Our first one comes from My Vet, who wanted to know what will be the first task upon boarding the International Space Station. Well, first task on board will be to just greet their crew members, and they'll gather in the Russian service module and exchange a couple of words with the teams on the ground, both in Moscow and in Houston. And then actually the first scheduled task for all of these crew members will be a midday meal. It's been several hours since the crew on the Soyuz 8 prior to getting suited up and leaving on their trip into space. And then for the crew already on board the station, it's right at midday meal time for their normal sleep schedule, so they'll all share that together. And then it'll actually move into what's known as a safety briefing. So it's customary that the International Space Station commander gives all newly arrived crews a safety briefing that typically lasts about 45 minutes, where they just do a refresher on all the particulars of reacting to an emergency on board station, where your routes are to your Soyuz spacecraft, where all the emergency equipment is, and just walking through it with all of the crew members.
Could you please?
Next question comes from Sid, who wanted to know, is this going to be the last usage of the Soyuz for space station travel? A number of you sending in questions asking if this is the last time we'll have American astronauts on a Soyuz, or will we only be flying on the new commercial spacecraft from SpaceX and Boeing? And the answer is no. This will not be the last usage. The intention is to continue to fly Americans on the Soyuz, and then also to fly Russians on the commercial crew vehicles coming online as part of our commercial crew program. We always want to maintain a U.S. and a Russian presence on board the station, as those nations are the ones most most well trained and most in tune with the various systems on the different segments. And so in order to keep that mixed crew, we're going to have to fly mixed crews on these different vehicles. So we fully intend to continue flying Americans on Soyuz and to eventually fly Russians on the U.S. commercial crew vehicles. And then a lot of people sending in the very pertinent questions about any risks of the crew spreading COVID-19 to the International Space Station, or what we've done to protect them. And the answer is we really have a very robust health stabilization program, is what it's referred to. So it's essentially a very strict quarantine for these crew members in the weeks leading up to their International Space Station flights. A couple of typical pre-launch activities were either scaled back or changed, largely ceremonial in nature, things like media briefings or visits to Red Square. But their quarantine procedures didn't really get that much of a change. The amount of individuals in the general area around the crew was scaled back. We saw with all of the rollout video of the crew leaving the hotel. There was a much smaller footprint of individuals down there in Baikonur, just due to all of the current travel restrictions. But we do have this stabilization plan already in place that requires a quarantine for these crew members, just even in normal times, to prevent them from bringing any bugs, viruses, things like that up to the space station with them, potentially getting their other crewmates sick, as they're essentially living in this closed environment. And so thanks to already having a lot of those robust procedures in place, we're very confident that we're able to launch these crew members safe and healthy and ready for their 6-month stays on board the International Space Station.
So, there are certain actions that are...
Altered Miscellany wanted to know how often they get to talk to their families. Pretty regularly, and then they'll have regularly scheduled video conferences with friends and family down here on the ground, using a lot of different communication tools that would be very familiar to you or I down here on planet Earth, essentially using video calling and even voice over IP, very similar to what we get, and it ends up functioning just like calling somebody on a cell phone. So they're able to get that on board the International Space Station. They also have access to email, so they're able to regularly send and receive messages from family on the ground, and they can do that every single day. Our next one comes from Alex. He wanted to know, how good is the internet on the International Space Station? The internet is serviced like all of the data transfer from the station by our tracking and data relay satellites. It's a constellation in orbit around the Earth that they're able to use to send data, send video, like we're getting right now, also send voice communications, but also use the internet. The astronauts are able to browse the web on board. And the station right now, thanks to upgrades in 2019, supports a 600 megabit per second connection. So it's getting more common to have gigabit connections down here on planet Earth, so not quite that fast, but considering they're orbiting about 250 statute miles over planet Earth, it's definitely fast enough. And that's handling all of the video coming down from station, all of the science data, all of the files being uplinked to the crew. So
here for now, and we'll figure it out later.
600 megabits. Our next question comes from Claire C. Wanted to know why the backup crew are being used. That is because one of the crew members that was originally slated to fly encountered a medical issue in some of the final stages of training. And since these crew members were getting some special training, when Andrew Morgan and Jessica Meir leave, along with Oleg Skropochka, we'll only have one USOS crew member. That's Chris Cassidy. US stands for the U.S. Operating Segment. It's really the half of the International Space Station that has the U.S.-sponsored modules, along with some from our international partners. And for certain things like spacewalks, which we have different systems, different suits, different procedures on the U.S. side and the Russian side. So the Russian crew members getting some special training in those procedures. In particular, one of the crew members in each the prime and the backup crew getting that training. And since these backup crews are essentially a pair, when one crew member had a medical issue, they had to swap out both. And so that's why the backup crew was used on this flight. But as we heard, pre-launch Anatoly Ivanishin and Ivan Vagner training just alongside with the prime crew for this over the last 2 years, so they were very well prepared and ready to support their stay on board the station.
Copy, thank you, 736.
And we haven't forgot about hatch opening. Again, they're still working through this pressure equalization. It can take a couple of minutes, so we're just going to continue to stand by. We should be seeing that Soyuz hatch open in just a little bit. And then we'll see Chris Cassidy, Anatoly Ivanishin, and Ivan Vagner make their way into the International Space Station. But for now, back to Twitter. Got some more Ask NASA questions. Tom Dang wanted to know what the grid fin on the fairing of the Soyuz launch vehicle does. Good eye and good question. If you do remember that Soyuz, there are grid fins. They're basically large structures on the launch shroud area. So the very top of the rocket has a large white area with the launch escape tower on top, and then a shroud that protects the Soyuz during that ride uphill. And there are 4 grid fins that are attached to the side. Those are stabilizers, so in the event of what's known as a phase 1 abort, so using that prime abort tower on top and the solid rocket motors on the fairing itself, those stabilizers are deployed in order to basically be attitude control, a stabilizer to ensure the vehicle doesn't go into a roll and is able to ensure a good pitch.
Okay, copy. That's great. And we're standing by for the pressure drop to stop at the 2-minute interval. This is page 80. Well, it's not really dropping, it's just decreasing. Well, okay, copy. Let's stand by for it to stop decreasing then. Because when you say the pressure is dropping, it just sounds too scary. Copy. We'll take that into the account for future. And if I understand it correctly, we're supposed to exit, we're going to have a PO event, and then after the video conference, we will do the deactivation steps. Is that correct? That's affirmative. But after the event, you will have to get back to the Soyuz and deactivate com assets per page 82 and install the cap, etc. We have already discussed it with you. This is page 82 in your ODF. Okay, so we will exit, hug everyone, and then we're getting back to the vehicle, to the Soyuz, complete all the actions per page 82, and then switch to SM steps. Yes, that's correct. All right. Irkutsk, this is Moscow, and we're standing by for another pressure reading. All right. Okay, 735 is the current pressure reading. 735, copy. And it looks like, okay, 735, yes. Well, just put it there for now. Okay, so we're going to exit now and hug everyone. And then I will come back here, deactivate everything, and we're going to have some kind of a video conference from the SM. And please smile. Okay, I will deactivate everything. Do not worry about it. We still have a lot to do here. Irkutsk, this is Moscow. We are standing by for another pressure reading. Well, it is still sort of decreasing. 734 is the reading. Copy. Irkutsk, this is Moscow. What is the current pressure reading? It is stable, 735. Copy. And Irkutsk, you're going to close KKT and KVD valves, then you can open BO-SU hatch cover. KKT, KVD valves are closed now. Okay, opening the cover now. Okay, handle is installed. Getting ready to open the hatch. Okay, press it. Okay, got it. Hatch is open. Let's see. Okay, and just go ahead and move over there. That's where the hatch is. And please smile. Moscow, this is Irkut 1. The hatch is open. Copy. Excellent. Great news.
All right, and as you can see, the hatch is open. Ivan Vagner first through, Chris Cassidy just behind him, making his way his third trip to the International Space Station. That hatch open coming at 11:28 a.m. Central Time, 12:28 p.m. Eastern Time, 16:28 GMT. And last but not least, Anatoly Ivanishin, also a third-time spaceflyer, making his way on board the station. Again, that hatch was opened at 11:28 a.m. Central, while the station was flying just under 270 statute miles over the Indian Ocean, just off the west of Australia.
Moscow, this is Irkut 1. Go ahead. So I'm in SM. No, not in SM. I'm actually in the Soyuz, and I am executing steps on page 82. Okay, copy. So, guys, we're going to say goodbye at this point. Thank you very much for all your work today. Anatoly, how do you read me? Yes, I can read you now. So I just wanted to thank you for all the work you did today, and I would like to wish you a successful flight. Thank you for your words, and also thank you for your support. Have a great day. All the best to you. Thank you, and my best regards to you as well. МБС, hardline con. Yes, Moscow, I'm signing off and deactivating Soyuz.com assets. Goodbye now. Goodbye.
Причал